What kind of person volunteers to help catch a serial killer while secretly being one? In 1977, a charming, articulate man sat across from a team of FBI profilers, confidently discussing how to hunt down America's most elusive serial killers. He offered chilling insights into the motivations, behaviors, and rituals of the violent predators law enforcement was desperate to understand. But behind his perfectly measured voice and charismatic grin was one of the most cold-blooded killers in American history. That man was Theodore Robert Bundy. To the untrained eye, Bundy looked like a polished legal mind or a gifted psychologist. This is the horrifying story of how Ted Bundy manipulated the legal system, law enforcement. He was raised believing his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his sister. This deception would define his earliest identity crisis, a psychological fracture that never fully healed. And even criminal profilers, while committing dozens of brutal murders across the United States. We explore the psychology, the legal system, and the darkest corners of real American crime stories every week. Bundy studied psychology at the University of Washington and later pursued law. But in the early 1970s, profiling was still in its infancy. There were no clear warning signs to the outside world. One minute he was thoughtful, the next he'd just go cold. Like he didn't have a soul. His professors described him as bright, articulate, and focused. Friends called him charming. His double life is more than just shocking. It forced the world to rethink how we define evil. Before we dive into this unforgettable case, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more in-depth, AI-narrated true crime documentaries that go beyond the headlines. His victims were often young, dark-haired women with a similar look, a detail that some believe matched an early romantic rejection. He was eventually arrested in Utah in 1975 for attempted kidnapping, but escaped custody twice, once from a law library and once from jail itself. The mask of normalcy, Bundy's early life. He used fake injuries, like wearing a cast or sling, to lure victims into helping him. She escaped and later became a key witness. Ted Bundy was born on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont, under the shadow of a lie. He was highly intelligent, well-dressed, and extremely aware of how to shape his image. But those close to him also noticed something off. One ex-girlfriend recalled, he would suddenly change. 2 were murdered, but he wasn't guessing. He was confessing without actually admitting guilt. Bundy had an early obsession with detective magazines, violent crime stories, and graphic imagery. These weren't just passing interests, they were clues. It was a desperate attempt to humanize himself before execution. In hindsight, Bundy fits the profile of a classic organized killer, intelligent, manipulative, and socially adept. By the time police in multiple states realized there was a serial killer among them, Bundy had already begun his spree. As crowds outside cheered, Bundy's final legacy wasn't brilliance. It was manipulation, cruelty, and deception. The killing begins, a cross-state crime spree. Ted Bundy didn't just kill, he hunted. His first confirmed murder occurred in 1974, but he likely started earlier. In Washington, women began disappearing from college campuses. Then in Utah, and soon after, Colorado. One survivor, Carol Darrange, recounted how he pretended to be a police officer and tried to handcuff her in a mall parking lot. Despite growing media attention, Bundy kept moving and changing names. He fled to Florida, where his violence escalated. On January 15, 1978, he broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University, assaulting 4 women in under 15 minutes. Just weeks later, he abducted and murdered 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. By the time of his final arrest, Bundy was wanted in 7 states, linked to over 30 murders, and suspected of many more. The psychological game manipulating the FBI. In one of the most disturbing twists, Bundy didn't just avoid capture. He offered to help catch other serial killers. While on death row, Bundy contacted FBI Special Agent Bill Hagmaier of the Behavioral Science Unit, the same unit that inspired the Netflix series Manhunter. Bundy pretended to be a consultant, offering criminal profiling tips to help law enforcement understand the minds of killers like the Green River Killer in Washington. Bundy spoke in the third person about the killer, describing patterns of stalking, trophy collection, and post-mortem behavior. Bill Hagmaier later said, "It was like he wanted to be remembered as an expert, not a monster. He wanted to control the story, even in death." Bundy believed his insights would buy him time, perhaps even sympathy, but the truth could not be masked forever. In 1989, Bundy was executed by electric chair in Florida State Prison. Courtroom chaos. Ted Bundy defends himself. Bundy's trial in 1980 was the first nationally televised murder trial in U.S. history, and he loved it. Acting as his own attorney, he turned the courtroom into a stage. He smiled at cameras, cross-examined witnesses, and even proposed to his girlfriend, Carol Ann Boone, in court. At one point, he asked a police officer to describe in detail the crime scene where 2 victims had been bludgeoned. His tactics were disturbing, but legally valid. He objected to evidence, questioned forensics, and stalled proceedings. This wasn't a defense strategy, it was re-traumatization. We were convicting someone who tried to act like he was smarter than the system. When the guilty verdict came, Bundy barely reacted. He received 3 death sentences for the Florida killings. One juror later said, "We weren't just convicting a murderer." Aftermath and legacy. The cultural impact of Bundy from fiction to documentaries. His image became cultural shorthand for evil in disguise. Bundy's case changed everything. Profiling methods evolved. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit advanced their interviewing techniques. Bundy's case proved that some killers are not deranged loners, but calculated manipulators who live among us. Media and public fascination. Bundy was the blueprint for the charming killer trope. Victim advocacy. Bundy's crimes led to better systems for reporting missing persons in cross-state. Cooperation between law enforcement. Women's fear became visible. His crimes made national headlines, but more importantly, they validated countless women's fear about being followed, silenced, or disbelieved. Sometimes, it looks like the guy who holds the door open, offers help, or smiles just a little too perfectly. Even in death, Bundy continued to shape public discourse about violence, justice, and the psychology of evil. But history will never forget him as what he truly was. A killer who helped the FBI hunt monsters while hiding the one inside himself. And evil, when it wears a mask, is harder to stop. He deceived, manipulated, and corrupted systems meant to protect us. And no matter how much he smiled, that smile hid the worst kind of predator. In the words of Ann Rule, the author who once worked with him and later wrote his biography, Ted was a mask. He was a shell filled with darkness. Ted Bundy didn't just kill. He proved that evil doesn't always look like a monster. The lesson from Bundy's story is haunting but clear. Charisma is not character. Intelligence is not innocence. Bundy wanted to be remembered as an expert, a manhunter,